So, hello everyone, and welcome to another session of Yoga Readers, where we read together and discuss online. Currently, we are reading The Tree of Yoga by B.K.S. Iyengar, and today we will discuss part 4 of this book. So, for those of you that are joining us today for the first time, Yoga Readers is an online global community open for everyone interested in reading about yoga and then discussing it with others. We are reading yoga books. We have a schedule. It's about one chapter for 2 or 3 weeks. I'm sending you focus questions to guide your reading. And then throughout the weeks of reading, I'm also sending you inspirational quotes through WhatsApp and our Facebook group, just to keep you in touch with the text, because I know that our everyday life can be overwhelming and many things can take us away from our reading material. So this is my way, my effort to keep you connected to this communal process we are going through. So it's true that everyone is reading at their own pace and in their own environment, but at the same time, it's hundreds of people reading the same text at the same time around the world, which for me is very exciting. So apart from inspirational quotes, I started sharing for every chapter one subject or one mythological story and kind of highlighting it, dissecting it, analyzing it, and explaining it more deeply, because every chapter has so many concepts and so many interesting remarks that we can just stop and have a conversation about them. So I added these highlights. And we also have a newsletter that kind of wraps everything together: the reading material, the highlights, the quotes, our previous sessions recordings, discussion questions that we had during our talks. And all of that is in the newsletter. And you were supposed to get it this morning. So you can check your email later and let me know if you want to join. And these sessions are recorded and can be found on YouTube as well, just to make it more available and accessible for everyone. So even if you're not joining into the live sessions, which I do hope that you can, because that's how I can meet you and hear your thoughts. But you can also read and then just watch the recordings. That's also part of the process. So for those of you who don't know me, let me introduce myself very briefly. My name is Agi Wittich. I've been practicing yoga for the last 2 decades. I've been researching yoga in academia through my BA, MA, and then my PhD that focused on Iyengar yoga and women. I've been searching for answers that come from my yoga practice and from my meditation and from all the experiences that I had. And my way of exploring them is talking to people and reading books about yoga. So that's kind of what led me both to my practice, to my academic research, and to opening this global community of yoga readers. So about today's session, we will start with a brief summary of part four. Then we'll continue with a close reading where I picked some paragraphs that you can read together. I'll show them on the screen, and then whoever wants can open their microphone and just read out that part. Then we'll continue to a group discussion and then a concluding section where I'll tell you about our next reading. So before we start, I would like to ask you, and you can write it in the chat or you can open your mic and just say very briefly, what is meditation for you? So what is your understanding of meditation? Do you practice meditation? You don't need to give me like a definition, but what is like one word that comes to mind when you hear meditation? What's the association you have with that word? Is it stillness? Is it confusion? Is it serenity? Because this part talks about meditation. Steph is saying contemplation. Anne Marie says quietness, a prayer and reflection. This is very similar to the word meditation that comes from Greek. It was a form of prayer and reflection. Okay, if you want to share more, you can. Let me go into the summary of part 4. So in part 4 of the Tree of Yoga, Iyengar guides us through this inner landscape of yoga. He describes this field as a journey of self-discovery that moves from external awareness into inner realization. So he begins by using this analogy that we've read in previous chapters about a tree that grows from seed to fruit to illustrate the spiritual journey in yoga. Now, this is different from the metaphor of the Ashtanga yoga, of the 8-limbed yoga, that also has a metaphor of a tree where the roots are the yama, the trunk is the niyama, and so on. Here, he uses the metaphor of the tree as a way to explain the progress we have in our spiritual journey. So going from the seed to a tree and then to having a fruit. So in this metaphor, the seed, this initial bit is actually our soul, which already contains all potential. And the fruit of that spiritual process of growing and maturing and then having a fruit is the self-realization. And the self-realization is actually the culmination of the yogic path. Like that's the goal. That's the goal of the soul in this world, to get to that self-realization. And he delves into different levels of consciousness that is explored through yoga practice. So Iyengar explains how a practitioner moves from the gross physical awareness that we all have, let's say when we go to a yoga class, but in our everyday life, we have our physical awareness. And that moves into increasingly subtle states of consciousness, which eventually touches the very core of our being. So this description is both like mystical, but also very practical. And it offers us a roadmap for our own exploration. So going from something that is familiar to something that looks a bit more elusive, or maybe we had that, but it was very temporal and we lost it. So it's kind of a roadmap to go from something we know to something that we aspire to knowing. So Iyengar challenges our, let's say, a common misconception about what is meditation. And we mentioned this in previous sessions as well, that meditation is not just sitting quietly, but it's a total of it's a state of total awareness that can be cultivated in all aspects of life. And he talked about this with regards to asana practice, that you don't need to separate the two. It's not that you meditate and you practice yoga postures, but that through a correct practice of yoga postures, you achieve meditation. He called it meditation in action. So here he describes meditation as a state of integration, where the typically fragmented aspects of our body, our body, the mind, our spirit, so different parts of our being, they come together in harmony in meditation. So his explanation of meditation is active, and it engages a state rather than a passive state. It's active, where I feel it's kind of a fresh and interesting way to explain meditation. It's not just sitting and trying to get somewhere. It's rather an approach, the way you do things that can be meditation in itself. So he weaves together philosophical concepts with practical instructions, and he makes abstract ideas accessible and applicable. So he explains in section 4 the interplay between the individual self. So for me, it's Agi, with this universal self, and he explains how the yoga practice can gradually dissolve this illusion or the illusionary boundary between the two. So through the practice of what we call meditation, but then he says meditation is different once you think, you can get into your self-realization. And he concludes this section with a reflection on how the concept of moving from external to internal awareness in yoga practice relates to our personal experiences of self-discovery. And he really encourages us, the readers, to connect to philosophical teachings, to connect the philosophical teachings with our own life experiences. So not to have them as merely something theoretical and therefore strange to us and something that is unachievable, but to really connect them to the way we feel yoga is. And that's a way where we can get more personally engaged with the concept of meditation. So I hope this wasn't too abstract, but actually that it resonated with your reading. And if you don't have any questions or something to add, we'll just dive into our close reading. Okay. So we start with the beginning. So the first subtitle is Return to the Seed, and we read from page 115. So I'm sharing the screen, and whoever wants can unmute themselves and read the yellow parts. Okay, so I'll read this bit, and whoever wants can join in later. So we have described the 8 limbs of yoga as the parts of the tree, proceeding from the roots to the flower and fruit. The spiritual development of the human being can also be likened to the growth of a tree from seed to full maturity. The quality of the growth of a tree cannot be seen in the seed, but it is hidden within it. The seed of the human being is the soul, within which the essence of our being is hidden. The soul in each individual is what causes that individual to grow, just as the seed causes the growth of the tree. When the tree is sown, after 1 or 2 days, it sprouts into a seedling. This seedling is known as dharmendriya. Indriya is an organ, and dharma is virtue or essential nature. Dharmendriya, the organ of virtue, is the conscience. This sprouting of the seedling of the soul gives the first perception, a perception of virtuousness, an opening of the gate. When the seed has thus opened, a stem grows out of it, which is chitta, or consciousness. Then that single stem, which comes out from the seed, divides into various branches. One branch is the small self, known as asmita. Another is ego or ahankara. Asmita is awareness of individual existence. It is not yet ego. It is the awareness of the self, of I am. Ahankara is ego. It is sprouting of asmita, the self, into action. As long as the self is not acting, it is asmita. But the moment it expresses itself in action, it becomes ahankara. As consciousness develops, it breaks into various branches. One branch is ahankara or ego. Another is buddhi or intelligence. Another is manas or mind. As the tree continues to grow, further branches emerge, which are the karmendriyas and jnanendriyas, the organs of action and senses of perception, which come into contact with the external world and create thought waves, fluctuations, deliberations, modulations, modifications. Like the leaves of a tree meeting the atmosphere, the individual self, the individual intelligence, and the mind come into contact with the outside world and gather information which feeds back to the branches, the main stem or trunk of consciousness, and the seed of the soul. Thus, they act bridge, as a bridge to bring the inner body and the outer body in contact with each other. And I just want us to continue to page 118 for another bit, and then I'll stop for questions or discussion. Is somebody volunteering to read, or should I continue? Okay. You should know the difference between consciousness and awareness. Consciousness exists everywhere in the body. Where you are walking, if a thorn touches your foot, what happens? It pricks, and you immediately feel the pain. So you cannot say that consciousness was not there. But until the thorn pricked you, you were not aware of your foot. The consciousness in your foot was dormant. But the moment that foot was pricked, it was brought to the surface. To awaken that dormant consciousness is awareness. Your consciousness is 6 feet long or 5.5 feet long in your body. It is as long as your body is tall, but awareness is small. Awareness may extend 2 feet, 1 foot, 1 inch, or half an inch. The yogi says that by practicing asanas, you can bring awareness to an extension equal to that of consciousness. That is total awareness. This is meditation. Okay. So is it too much to take in, or is it completely clear? I'm not sure by your reactions.
It's a lot
yeah,
to take in.
it's a lot to
What I've
take
been
in.
doing is like writing copious notes and then paring them down. Like when he was doing the analogy with later about like breaking the clay dish, having something and then break it down and then remake it, or transforming the forms that gold is in, like from I got so lost in those explanations, and then I realized, oh, that's how we break our mind and our consciousness apart, so that we can separate them and then put everything back together and be able to meditate.
Should we read this part about clay? Are you curious about this part?
Yeah, that's okay.
Oh, okay, let's read the clay part. So it's page 134. It's not marked because I wasn't planning on reading it. So he says, now let us look at them psychologically. Consider the nature of clay. Now, this is a very ancient metaphor, this idea of clay and pot of clay. The earth powder is the primary cause out of which various forms or designs are made. It may be a jar, it may be a vase, it may be a bowl. All these things can be formed from the powder of the earth. If you want to change the form, you have to break the one you have and return to the original powder before you can make a new design. Now, Chitta Vritti Nirodha, restraining the movements of the mind, according to Patanjali, is not yoga. It is just the beginning of yoga. Chitta Vritti means the movements of consciousness, the various forms consciousness can take, like the clay taking various shapes. Then he goes into gold, which is another very common metaphor. So the clay is the material, the essence. Well, the essence is the earth, so it always has an origin. But then how we see it, the form, whether it's a jar or a vase, that's the consciousness. The awareness is understanding it's clay. And then the yogic journey is understanding that clay comes from earth. So seeing the origins of our consciousness. Does it make sense, Steph?
Yeah.
Okay.
It does.
I remember learning about this when I did my BA in philosophy. And in Greek philosophy, there are many similarities between Greek philosophy and some, let's say, Hindu philosophy metaphors, I find. And in Greek philosophy, they also Aristotle talks about the form and the material. And he talks about, again, pots and clay. And in different yogic texts later, the body is considered to be the clay pot. And then what to do about it? Should you break it? Then you don't have your body, so don't neglect your body. But if you have to understand that it has its limitations, so your boundaries of the body, they are fixated because that's how the world works. But at the same time, you're not confined to it. I don't want to go deep into different metaphors that you have not read, but this idea of having a seed, that the seed is our soul, that's quite elusive. But then the sprouting of it is our sense of self. I am Steph, I am Michal, I am Agi, I am Martina, I am Anne-Marie. This idea of I-ness that is very prevalent, it comes from a deeper source. So we are a pot, we are a vase, but we also think of us as different than one another. But if we look at the source and we understand that the source is the soul, if we look inward, then we can understand our true self. Yeah, it's easy to explain, isn't it? But then it's very hard to understand. Okay, I'd like us to go on reading maybe the text. This rereading of the text will make it more accessible. Yes, please. Is there a question? Okay. So we go to page 120. Somebody wants to read?
Read it. I can read it if you want.
Yes, please.
Patanjali introduces ways of culturing the brain, whereby, sorry, I just have to make it bigger, whereby its four parts are made passive. They are made to remain as objects, like our hands and legs, so they may become silent. When they are silent, there's absolutely no movement of the brain. Instead of being extroverted, the brain becomes introverted and begins to trace its source. This passivity has been experienced by us all in moments of sleep, where the brain does not function at all, but remains as a thing. At that time, one loses the awareness of oneself. Yoga philosophy describes this state as a spiritual plateau or spiritual desert, as when people come and go at a crossroads, but do not know in which direction to go if there are no signposts. It is also a state of poise and peace. Patanjali warns us not to be caught in this quietness. There is something beyond it, known as the seat of the very conscience. If you reach tranquility of consciousness and get caught up in it, remember that there is a downfall known as yoga bhrasta, which means fallen from the grace of yoga. This occurs when one gets caught up in this stage and imagines that this is the end, that is the end of yoga. The practice of yoga must continue as it has to culminate, according to Patanjali. That's it, is it? Oh, sorry, the next part. Sorry, let me go back up. According to Patanjali, in the sight of the soul. So from fluctuation to stillness, stillness to silence, and silence to the sight of the soul is the journey of yoga.
Thank you. So here he basically says, don't stop at stillness. Don't think that chitta vritti nirodha stop when you stop thinking and there is this silence and this void, then that's the thing. And this is common for yogic texts, actually. They describe a certain stage and they say, don't get caught in it. Know that there is a continuation of the exploration. So here we say in modern times, don't think that asana is it. It's not about asana. Don't think that pranayama is it. Just go beyond. And then when you reach this point of stillness that comes in dhyana, according to tradition, he says, don't stop there. Don't think that when there is this quietness, that's that. So, because having a coma or being asleep is similar to that, not having anything there. He says you have to move on into samadhi when there is this self-realization, where there is something, a fullness, truth, an experience. And sometimes it's also explained as bliss, as a state of bliss, of joy, of this tremendous happiness. So don't stop at the void, at the nothingness. And it's a question that was many times raised. So is yoga about stopping things, stopping your thoughts? Is it about not thinking? Is it about not having empathy or feelings, or is it about a negative state? And here Iyengar says, no, it has a very crucial truth to it that must be explored. So in the way to getting there, many things needs to be stilled. I am not the body, or I am not only the body. I am not tied to my emotions. I am not moved by my emotions. And then I move on, and I realize who I really am. And that is linked to the concept of prana, of this primordial energy, this primary energy. And that's where I thought we should continue reading when he writes about pranayama, and that connects more. Like for me, it's more clear where he connects it to meditation. Pranayama is very close to meditation as he describes it. So he says, oh, I forgot to tell you the page number, did I? So page 124. So let me go back to it. So prana means energy. Then we can continue reading if you want. Okay, so I'll read. It's a small part. Prana and consciousness are in constant contact with each other. They are like twin brothers. It is said in yoga texts that as long as the breath is still, prana is still, and hence the mind is still. All types of vibrations and fluctuations come to a standstill when prana and consciousness are quiet, steady, and silent. Knowing this connection between breath and consciousness, the wise yogis of India advocated the practice of pranayama, which is the very heart of yoga. So, in a way, if the aim of meditation is to still the thoughts, and the yogic texts say that the breath and the thoughts are linked, another way to still the thoughts is through pranayama practice. It's true that if you sit and quiet yourself, that will affect the breath, but you can do it the other way around. If you still the breath, or if you quiet the breath, if you practice pranayama, you can get a still mind. And maybe you have experienced this in pranayama classes where you have this quietness during your deep practice. And again, quite elusive because it comes and goes. And when you have it, you don't have a thought of, oh, my mind is quiet now. And if you do have that awareness, that thought, not awareness, but thought, then it goes away, because then you get aware of it, like, oh, I'm having a still moment. And then I-ness comes in and you lose it. But as long as you practice your pranayama techniques, and through quietening the breath, you are quietening your mind, you can get to that state. And I can really resonate with that. So we jump to page. So here I chose a few passages, 127 to 128, and then we jump to 128 to 131. So a few pages, but just a few paragraphs within them. So this is 127 at the bottom. Prana is energy.
I can read
Yes,
again.
please.
I read it now. Prana is energy. Ayama is the storing and distribution of that energy. Ayama has three aspects: vertical extension, horizontal extension, and circumferential extension. Through pranayama, we learn to make energy move horizontally, vertically, and circumferentially to the frontiers of the body. Pranayama is the link between the physiological and the spiritual organism of man. As physical heat is the hub of our life, so pranayama is the hub of yoga. The Prasna Upanishad says that consciousness and prana are twin brothers. Similarly, the Hatha Yoga Pradipika says that where there is mind, there is breath, and where there is breath, there is mind. If you can control the breath, you can control the mind, and vice versa. So you should learn to make the breath rhythmic through pranayama. But it is not to be practiced without due caution, because it can make you or mar you. If your heartbeat is uneven, fear sets in and death may be near at hand. Similarly, if pranayama is unrhythmic, your energy is sapped instead of being enhanced. Thank you. Pranayama is at the frontier between the material and the spiritual world, and the diaphragm is the meeting point of the physiological and spiritual body. If, when you hold your breath, your mind sinks after some time, that is not kumbhaka. Even by counting 1, 2, 3, 4, you have lost divinity, you have lost peace. Remember that kumbhaka is not holding breath, it is holding energy. Kumbhaka is realizing the very core of the being, which is brought towards the body. You don't think externally and you don't think internally. Having controlled the movements which take place inside and outside, you see that in silence, no thinking takes place. When you don't think at all, where is the mind? It dissolves in the self.
When you inhale.
Oh,
Yes,
yeah.
sorry, go on.
Pardon me. When you inhale, the self comes into contact with the body. Hence, inhalation is the evolution of the soul towards the body and the spiritual cosmic breath coming into contact with the individual breath. Exhalation is the surrender of our ego. It is not the expulsion of air, but the expulsion of ego in the form of air. In exhalation, you become humble, whereas pride comes in inhalation. Pranayama is also spiritually dangerous if you do not know how to practice it. To say I can hold the breath for 1 minute is pride. To learn pranayama is to learn and to understand the movement from attachment to non-attachment, non-attachment to attachment.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
These are very inspirational bits for me. And I don't know if you resonate with this idea of the role of inhalation, the role of exhalation, stopping of breath kumbhaka that we mentioned in earlier sessions. And I've sent you the story of the churning of the ocean of milk that also speaks about pranayama or breath techniques and how they cultivate prana or the energy, our life energy, our life force, and how the demons and the gods try to bring amrita or the liquor of immortality, which is prana, basically, how they try to take it out from the ocean of milk. And yogis thought that if they can maintain their prana, if they control their breath, then they can be immortal. I wrote a paper about it. My MA thesis was about these immortal yogis in South India. So pranayama is much more than a breathing technique or a way to get into meditation and stilling the mind. It's about our life. And we know this. When we are born, we take our first breath. And when we die, we take our last breath, right? We die with an exhalation. We are born with an inhalation. So the breath, the mind, and the yogi goal are all firmly interconnected. And we won't read a part that is called Energy and Divine Grace, where Iyengar discusses the three main energy channels, the Ida, Pingala, and Susumna, where he explains Kundalini energy and how to awaken Kundalini energy. And he talks about practice of yoga and getting the divine grace of the Lord, which is necessary to awaken the Kundalini. These are not things that one can just do. And then he goes on to a section that is called meditation and yoga, where Iyengar explains that meditation cannot be taught, but must be experienced. And I think that many times in the Iyengar tradition, students ask, why don't you teach meditation? And well, teachers teach meditation, but not in the way that students want them to. It's not take your meditation pillow and take your meditation scarf and sit down and now we're doing meditation, because that's what people think meditation is. And in this part about meditation and yoga, he discusses the relationship between the ethical discipline and the spiritual practice and emphasizes that meditation cannot be separate from other aspects of yoga. So here I'd like us to read, again, a small bit in page 139 about meditation and yoga. I'm just getting to the page. Here it is. So I'll read. What does Patanjali say about the effect of asana? The dualities between body and mind disappear. This is in Yoga Sutra 248. What does he say about the effect of pranayama? He says, Dharanasu cha, it's without the Sanskrit. The veil covering the light of knowledge is removed, and the mind is made a fit instrument for concentration. This is in Yoga Sutra 252 and 53. And what of the effect of pratyahara? Through through pratyahara, the senses stop importuning the mind for their gratification and are withdrawn from their external pastures in order to help the mind on its inner quest. This is Yoga Sutra 254. Thus, these three practices lead the practitioner to dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. Patanjali has coined a special word for dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. It is samyama, or total integration, which we also call meditation. Dharana means attention or concentration. It is a way of focusing attention on a particular chosen path, region, spot, or place within or outside the body. Dharana is control of the fluctuation of consciousness to focus it towards a single point. In dharana, one leads gradually to decrease the fluctuation of the mind so that one ultimately eliminates all waves or tides of consciousness, and the knower and the known becomes one. When consciousness maintains this attention without altering or wavering in the intensity of awareness, then dharana becomes jnana, or meditation. When oil is poured from one vessel into another, it maintains a constant, steady, and even flow. Likewise, the flow of attention and awareness should remain stable and constant. This steady awareness is jnana. Jnana is the way of discovering the greater self. It is the art of self-study, observation, reflection, and sight of the infinite hidden within. It begins with the observation of physical process, then involves watchfulness of the mental state, then blends the intelligence of the head with that of the heart to delve deep in profound contemplation. By this profound contemplation, the consciousness merges with the object of meditation. This conjunction of subject and object makes the complex consciousness simple and spiritually illuminated. The effect of yoga is that you are kindled with the light of knowledge and keep yourself completely pure with an innocent mind, not with an arrogant mind. That is the beauty of the wisdom of yoga. It is wisdom with innocence, not with arrogance. This is the effect of meditation. Arrogance, pride, and ego are transformed and transfigured towards humility and innocence, which lead towards samadhi, which is the enlightenment or self-realization. So I would like us to continue to a discussion part. I wanted us to read a part that discusses meditation is like the weather, that it changes frequently. It's in page 146. I leave it to you. And we won't read also a part where Iyengar discusses the three transformations that occur in meditation. You can look for that in the text. And then he also explains what the difference between living in the moment and then living moment to moment, how that is different. And there is another part that we won't read that is called From Body to Soul, which talks about the 4 stages of practice or the 4 stages of practitioners, which is something I sent you through WhatsApp and Facebook, and it's in the newsletter, where Iyengar explains the progression from physical awareness to spiritual realization. And he discusses there how we can achieve freedom from bodily bondage through proper practice of yoga. So do you have any questions, or should we proceed to our discussion questions? Okay. I'll stop here the recording. Oh, first I'll read out the questions and then I'll stop the recording for a more free discussion. So the first question is, Iyengar describes yoga as a journey from body to soul. So how does this resonate with your personal yoga journey? Is this something you aim to? Is this something you think about? Is this something very strange to you? So second question, how do you interpret Iyengar's explanation of energy and divine grace in yoga? The third question is, Iyengar discusses the nature of meditation. How does this compare to your own experiences or understanding of meditation? So I'll stop the recording here and I'll meet you again after the discussion. So thank you all for a very interesting discussion about meditation, your experiences, and we discussed the risk of getting caught in an illusion, and we talked about the need of having an external teacher and being part of a tradition that has knowledge about the spiritual path. But we also mentioned our own resources that we have, that these are things that we have to do for ourselves. As Iyengar said, that meditation cannot be taught, but we have to practicing it nevertheless. So our next reading is chapter 5 or part 5 of the Tree of Yoga, which is Yoga in the World. And I'll send out focus questions for that part. We will meet again in 2 weeks. I'll send you reminders. I'll send you inspirational quotes through WhatsApp and Facebook. And I've sent an emphasis or a highlight about Patanjali and the 4 stages of yoga practice on WhatsApp, on Facebook, and in our newsletter. It's also available now on the website as well. And we'll keep in contact. If you have any questions, you can always send them to me. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Agi.
Thank you, Aggie. Bye.
See you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.